We're live. You're good.
We're live?
Yeah.
Oh, it still says printing on mine. I'm just clapping like a moron. All right, let's jump into it. John Plumstead here with Frank Scappaticci, virtual real estate investing podcast brought to you by Greyline Investments. How you doing today, Frank?
I'm doing awesome, man. It's been a busy week. A great week, though, for our company, so that makes me happy. But I'm without nanny care because of the snowstorm in the Northeast part of the U.S. So me and my wife have been working and scrambling, watching our two kids. So I'm exhausted, but I'm feeling very positive about work and everything else going on in my life. So that's where I'm. How are you?
Yeah, we're getting crushed by the snow, man, but it's good. I'm good. I'm excited to jump into this, though. We get a lot of people asking us how to get started. Okay, and we like to work with people that have done a couple deals and are looking to scale. But the bottom line is, 9 out of 10 people, if not, 99 out of 100, come to us and say, hey, I want to get started in real estate investing. So how do you answer that question, Frank? How does someone get started real estate investing?
Well, I think it depends on your personality type. I think like your risk tolerance, how much money you got, like all that stuff comes into play. But if I'm going to give a general answer, the average person, and you're getting involved in off-market real estate, I probably would tell them to take somewhat of a not risk-averse approach, but one of the less risky approaches, and probably meet with a wholesaler or agent that gets pocket listings and buy a home that can be a rental and do a BRRRR. And for anyone that doesn't know what a BRRRR is, it's rehab, rent, refinance, repeat. That's what BRRRR stands for. So I buy a house that needs a little bit of repair. And I wouldn't take on a massive rehab as my first project. I think I know single family, and in the single family space, that's where a lot of deals are won and lost. I think the most important part of the deal is the price, but the rehab is the second most important part. And when you can lose money. So I would take on something maybe 20 grand and below on the rehab side, maybe buy a house under 200 grand that hopefully you can rent at like $1,500 or more and do a BRRRR. And if it works out well, do it again. That's probably what I would say.
Yeah, I'm just going to be super blunt. I think I don't always tell this to people because I don't want to crush them, but I think the majority of people need to be told don't invest in real estate. Straight up. Like, I'm a real estate investor. I love real estate, but I think most people should be told don't do it. And the reason why is like it's really, really hard. Right. Mm-hmm. I look at investing in real estate. There's a lot of different ways to make money, but ultimately the way we look at it is we try to find something that's, worth $1 and we try to buy it at 70 cents on the dollar. We do it in real estate, but there's plenty of other industries where you could do that, right? Where you try to buy low and then sell high. And I think it's really difficult in real estate. I think too many people are told that you can make a lot of money really fast, come do it, and you'll be rich, and it'll be easy, and you're guaranteed all this stuff. So I'm going to answer the question. I'm going to tell you how to get started.
Okay.
But ultimately, I think you should be cautious because it is really, really difficult. But after I've said all that, right? After I've said all that, if you are like, I don't care, I want to get started, the first thing I would tell someone is do 100 hours of research. Whether it's YouTube videos or podcasts or reading books, like invest 100 hours before you invest any money. Right? Like try to start getting that knowledge base. When you started getting interested in real estate, what are some of those resources you use, Frank?
Yeah, podcasts were a big thing. I started with Bigger Pockets, and my routine actually was I would go on the train at like 7:30 a.m. on my way to Manhattan to work. I would listen to a Bigger Pockets podcast, and then the way home, I would read. And I kind of kept that cadence for a while. Eventually, my podcasts evolved to like real estate disruptors and something that was a little bit more advanced because I knew I wanted to start getting more and more involved in the off-market space. But I think Bigger Pockets is a great place to start. A couple of books that I read that at least exposed me to the fact that real estate requires hustle was a book, Building Wealth One House at a Time. The author in that book, old school. The guy, I think his last name was Schwab. And he's like, yeah, he was driving for dollars guy. He would drive for dollars. And he started talking about that in the book. And then it kind of hit me like, oh, wow, like you actually do need to create a competitive advantage to succeed at a high level and to have a scalable business. You can't just like call a random agent in Colorado and be like, hey, give me deals. That agent's like, hey man, if I get a slam dunk deal, I might just buy that myself, right? Like, so definitely I agree with you on the research. I might have just jumped the gun before. I thought we were going right into buying deals, but I do agree with you for sure.
All good, all good. So then if someone gets knowledgeable, I agree. I think the first strategy people can jump into is called the BRRRR strategy. B and then 4 R's: buy, rehab, rent, refinance, repeat. And the idea is you can kind of have infinite money doing that, right? You can put money in as a down payment, then you refinance, pull that money out, and you've got a long-term rental with very little of your own capital in there, so you can continue it over and over. And that's actually what our initial game plan was, right?
Yeah, it was. I think to put it in one sentence is leverage other people's cash to have infinite returns, right? Like that is the sentence. That is maybe the primary reason why real estate is fantastic. You can get an infinite return. So our goal was, hey, get 100. We had probably a little bit over 100 grand between you, me, and Justin that we could just throw around, right? From what I remember. Let's say we find a house, $70,000. It needs 20K worth of work and it'll appraise at 145. Like that's a typical wholesale deal. You can find those deals. The deal I just described, you likely can rent that house out for maybe $1,200. And if everything checks out, like I just said, when you do your refinance, you could pull out pretty much every dollar, right? So you could pull out your original 90K investment. So what's your return? It's infinite, right? You have no money in the deal, hopefully 6 months or less, and you're making a couple $100 a month, and you've probably got yourself 20 grand in equity or so built into the deal, right? So that is the reason, right? So I think having infinite return and scalability is really the benefit. And scalability kind of comes from the fact that you can get an infinite return. I was talking about this before. If you use the stock market as another example or another investment, like there's no infinite return for most people if you're just going into buying equities, right? If you buy Amazon stock, it's going to cost you $2,000 to buy one piece of stock. If you want to juice those returns by doing options, you're just taking on more risk, right? Whereas if I'm doing a BRRRR, I'm actually kind of taking less risk, right? But like you said before, the challenge is it's hard to do because it's so awesome. People do it and they do it at an extremely high level. So if you're just getting involved, like you probably need some mentorship and some help. So
who do you think is the best candidate to be a BRRRR investor? What, kind of time, finances, interest level, who makes the best BRRRR investor?
That's a tough question. I'm not sure if a great BRRRR investor has different qualities than a great flipper. I think anyone that does off-market real estate, although you have to underwrite things very honestly, and what I mean by that is this, people that really are deal hungry, that want to buy deals, I feel like they go in their Excel sheets and they play with the numbers to like try to make the deal work. Like they want to buy it so bad. They're like, well, I'm putting $200 aside for maintenance. I'd probably put 100. I don't need to allocate that much CapEx or whatever. So people do that type of stuff. You can't do that, right? You have to be very honest with yourself. You have to look at the properties like a math equation, right? That's probably step number one if you're just getting started. But step number two is once you complete that analysis and you say, I'm ready to go, like I have my price for whatever asset you're trying to buy, like you need to go. You need to be decisive. It's like you're thinking, you're plotting, and then once you make a decision, like you need to try to get that deal like your life depended upon it, right? So I think like measured but aggressive action is very, very important. And I've said that a lot between me and you. I think decisiveness is huge.
Yeah, no, I agree. Although I think BRRRR investing as a strategy could be the long-term goal, I think I often see it as the middle ground, right? As someone who has maybe done a live-in flip, or they've lived in a house, then moved away and kept it as a rental. And now they're like, hey, I want to do a BRRRR as maybe that next deal before I do the all-out flip, before I go into wholesaling. Which is where we're going to go next, right? Because we started like, hey, let's grow this BRRRR portfolio. And then we started getting aggressive with marketing. And before you know it, we had more deals than we knew what to do with. So we're like, let's try to wholesale. So
Right.
why do you think wholesaling is a good strategy for someone getting started?
Well, I mean, it's quick cash, right? If you don't have, no one starts wholesaling, in my opinion, with $10 million in the bank, right? There might be 0 people in the country that already have $10 million or a really, really, really sizable net worth that just start wholesaling, right? So if you're trying to quit your day job, wholesaling might make sense. If your goal is to work for yourself and be an entrepreneur and then graduate to higher levels of real estate, wholesaling is a great fix for that, right? Because you can replace your salary faster than you would if you acquired 20 rentals. That's a fact. But if you're trying to be a BRRRR investor and you don't want to, maybe haven't raised private money before, you don't have access to as much capital as some of the other people that are doing it. Like, you can make 60, 80, 100 grand in a couple months wholesaling, right? So if you're uncomfortable taking other people's money and you want to do a BRRRR strategy and you're willing to do some hustle and some direct to seller marketing, wholesaling works. So in short, the answer is cash, man. You're trying to get cash in your business. Wholesaling is effective.
Nice. So how do you define wholesaling in 30,000 foot perspective?
Wholesaling can be done in any asset. People wholesale PS5s right now, right? You buy an asset at a particular price for hopefully less than it's worth, and you immediately sell it at a higher price. In our business, that means putting homes under contract and then assigning the interest or the right to purchase that property to another investor for a fee. That's our definition legally.
So what's the difference between wholesaling and flipping? Because it sounds like what you're saying is buy low, sell higher. But what is that unique difference?
Well, the unique difference is, well, at least in our case, if you're doing assignments, we never actually legally own that property. We have the right to purchase the property, and then we sell that right to purchase the property. Going back to the stock market, this is kind of like an option contract, right? So we bought that option at a low price, and then we look at the market and we say the market's going to give us a higher price for that option. Sell it. So that is the difference. If you're going to flip the house, I hope you own it. If you're going to actually flip a house, you probably should have the rights to that particular property, because you're obviously have liability once you start knocking doors down and doing demo. So you got to buy the property most of the time.
Gotcha. So we like looking at deals in kind of 3 phases: finding, funding, and finishing the deal. So let's start with finding a deal. How do you find a wholesale deal? Let's start with that young hustler out there who doesn't want to put any money in, but they got a lot of energy to go find deals. How do we help this person go find deals with very little budget?
Yeah, I think if the person already has a job, which most people do, I'm probably driving for dollars on the weekend. So download Deal Machine or some application that helps you stay organized. But I'm driving around my neighborhood or wherever I want to invest, and I'm looking for homes that are in disrepair or have evidence that the seller might be motivated. I was talking to another investor yesterday, and in his business, he drives around on trash day and he looks for people that didn't put out their trash. If they didn't put out their trash, he then walks on their property and checks their electric meter to see if they're actually expending any electricity. If those 2 things check, he knows it's either someone who is a homeowner that moved out for whatever reason, maybe it's financial duress, or if it's a landlord, he knows that it's vacant and they're not collecting rent, right? So he knows one of those 2 things are likely true. So that's probably a motivated seller. How scalable that operation is, I'm not really sure, but is he getting qualified leads at probably a high clip? Yes. So that's one example of a strategy for driving for dollars. During the week on my free time, like me when I was in the train, if I was trying to hustle, I'd look up for sale by owner and failed listings on the MLS, and I start calling them direct, like right from my cell phone. I wouldn't even worry about masking my phone numbers on CallRail or some application. I'm just straight hustling on my cell phone, making those phone calls, driving for dollars in the weekend. And I think, honestly, if you do that for 30 to 45 days, your odds of picking up a deal, I think, are better than 50% if you're doing it right and your salesmanship is somewhat good. I think you can do it.
Oh, I agree. We call a qualified lead in our business someone who owns the house, wants to sell, and is willing to take a below market offer. And if you look up for sale by owner leads on Zillow, we know they own the home. We know they want to sell. They might not be willing to take a below market offer, but that's only one variable you're playing with. I think too many people try to get too clever with finding deals. The bottom line is at this point in our business, we've got a pretty big marketing budget, and we still call for sale by owners on Zillow every single day, and it produces, right?
It does. It produces. I also think if you have any, this is getting a little bit advanced, but if you have a process where you give referrals to agents, like for sale by owners are awesome. Like agents are calling them anyway. So like if you call them and you establish great rapport, best case scenario, you lock up that deal at a price that makes sense for your business. Worst case scenario, you're like, hey man, if you're interested in getting that price, I highly advise you working with this rock star agent I got over here. Bam. Like, and you can collect the marketing fee or the referral fee however you want. So I think they're good leads. They're almost pre-qualified, right? They want to sell the house. If you're sending a text message or doing a cold call to a seller, what do you ask them, right? Do you own the home? Are you interested in selling? And then maybe you ask them, are you interested in selling at a discount or below market price, right? If they're on the for sale by owner list, they're checking 2 out of those 3 things right off the bat. So yeah, I think they're good leads for sure.
Gotcha. And then Craigslist, I think there's a lot of really low end houses on Craigslist, but the bottom line is everything we just said about Zillow, this rings true for Craigslist as well. There's a bunch of deals in Craigslist. You might have to look harder to find them because there's a lot of garbage too, but there's definitely deals there. So what about if someone is willing to spend a couple $1,000s on marketing to find their first deal? What advice do we give them?
Yeah, I think if I'm thinking about our KPIs where they are right now, when I mean KPIs, like how we use SMS, cold call, and RVM. And in terms of which ones are performing the best, the most cost-effective one for us right now is cold calling, but I think it requires the most amount of training and work, right? Definitely requires the most amount of work on behalf of whoever is picking up the phone, right? SMS is in second place in terms of how effective it is, and we can send out a lot of volume. And then RVM's we do it because it's cheap to get them out the door, but we're not getting as many leads as the other two, at least in our business right now. So I think there's some of it's a time equation. If I have W-2 job, limited time, and I have some money, text, right? You might be sacrificing a couple $dollars in the cost per lead category, but you're saving yourself a lot of time and a lot of frustration because cold calling, as we all know, if you don't have a lot of time and you're in a pinch and you have to make 100 cold calls, that's a very stressful way to live, right? So I'm definitely going to recommend, if you have a job, just admit to yourself you don't have 40 hours to work on this and send out the text messages. That's it, right? Direct to seller, pull a list in PropStream, send out SMS. What do you think? I mean, you might have a different opinion.
No, I agree. So on average, let's say it's going to cost 5 cents to get someone's address and name from public records. If you're paying, you can pull that stuff off public records, but a lot of the websites are going to charge you 5 cents. And then to get their phone number, it's going to charge you 15 cents or so. So you're going to be into it for 20 cents, right? Once you have that name and phone number of, we'll call it a tired landlord, right? Someone who's a landlord and you're betting on the fact that they want to get rid of the property. You're saying text them. I like text. I like cold calling. I think ringless voicemail could also be good, right? That person that's like, hey, I've got a list of 1,000 people. I'm just going to send them all a ringless voicemail and see who calls back. I think that's a really good use of time, and it's really cheap as well. So that could work.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Frank.
Comment. So one thing I was thinking about, and I was thinking about this when I was talking to that guy I just referenced before. He has like a very time intensive like lead generation strategy, right? Where he's driving around and I'm like, man, like you're spending a lot of time on lead gen, but I do admit those leads are probably of higher quality. So then I feel like I could make the argument if you're doing something like that to do direct mail, right? To spend a little bit more on like your post lead gen activity and make it a little bit more personalized because you've already expended so much effort up front. So you could spend a little bit more on the second step. So that was a thought I had yesterday, and I just wanted to throw that out there. I hadn't thought about that before.
Yeah, I think potentially. So your assumption there is that direct mail is going to have a greater connection than a phone call or a text message, which I don't disagree with, but I don't agree with either, right? I'm not sure, I'm not sure. We haven't done a lot of direct mail. I've done some, but haven't done enough to say that for sure. What are some of the next levels of marketing? Okay, like you can take all that stuff up, you can 10x it, and that's kind of what we've done in our business. But we've tried some other things, and some people have success. What are other ways that people get deals?
Yeah, I mean, you could try to get inbound marketing. So you could do pay-per-click, or you have your websites and you try to do some SEO optimization. I mean, basically in those cases, you're typically paying an extra amount of money to some type of vendor. It could be Facebook, could be a social media platform, could be Google, right? All that stuff is out there, and you're paying them so that you can pop up at the top of the list, right? That's kind of where it's at. So in our case, we have Grayline Home Buyers. That's the website that we want sellers to be directed to if they're interested in selling their house to us. So you can say, hey, Facebook, for everyone that lives in Clarksville, Tennessee, that fits this demographic, we want them to be served this particular ad. Or you could tell Google the same thing. Basically, how I look at it from a business owner perspective is in that case, you're reducing your hustle at a cost, right? So I think it's likely, especially now since those spaces are very competitive, your cost to generate a lead or your cost per lead are probably going to be higher doing that when you start out versus cold calling, text messaging, driving for dollars, or ringless voicemail. But I mean, it's somewhat fair because they are removing a lot of the work. In our business, I don't know if we got into it at the wrong time or if for whatever reason, maybe our website stinks. I don't think it does. I think it's fine. I think it's good. But we spent a good amount of money on PPC, and we didn't get a ton of results. But I do know other wholesalers are successful there. So, yeah, that's my answer. That's an inbound strategy.
Yeah. So outbound means like, hey, we're going to reach out to these people. We're going to get their name and we're going to reach out to them. Inbound means like we're going to put a billboard out there and hope they call us. The billboard could be a digital billboard or whatever. And then there's also opportunities to just do outsourced marketing, right? You pay an agency that will give you leads, right? So there's that option as well. So lots of different ways to find deals. We'll come back to funding deals, okay? Because, find, fund, finish. But the great thing about wholesaling is you don't have to fund the deal, right? Like if you get a deal locked up, you get to skip the whole funding and you get to go right to finish. So how do you finish a wholesale deal, Frank?
Yeah, so you got to find a cash buyer, right? So if you're well networked already, you might already know who that person is. There's wholesalers out there that basically work for less than 5 buyers. They're in one market. They got 5 private equity firms or 5 really rich guys or gals that buy tons of properties from them, and they just disposition them to them. They assign the contract, they're done, right? But that's not most people. That's a select group of wholesalers. Most of the time, what most of us do is whatever city we're in, we got to build our cash buyers list for that particular city, right? So I'm in Fayetteville, North Carolina. I might spend a little bit of time grooming that list or putting it together as I'm searching for deals. But in our business, we say, get the deal and let the rest follow, right? So for anyone who's getting started, don't spend a month building a cash buyers list because none of those cash buyers are going to care who you are until you start bringing deals. Like you might call them and they're going to say, cool. Good to know. Okay, let me know when you have a deal. And they're going to hang up the phone, and then you're not going to talk to them until you find a deal. That's what happens. Everyone does the same thing, right? So get a deal. Then you put your cash buyers list together. This is based off of connections you've made. It might be at RIAs, other events that you go to, meetup.com, whatever. But you can pull that list too, right? Just like you pull lists for sellers on PropStream or IDI or whatever data source you have, you can pull cash buyers as well. And the other thing that's cool is now when you pull your cash buyers list, it has all the people that obviously bought deals cash. If those people own multiple properties or buy tons of properties in a given time period, you can actually see their portfolio now in a lot of these tools. So you can see, hey, John Smith in Fayetteville owns 30 properties. I should add him to my cash buyers list, right? Obviously. In fact, nowadays, I think it's smart to sort your cash buyers list when you do have to start making calls, if you're going to start cold calling, and sort them by how many deals they do, right? And prioritize the people at the top. So it's kind of simple. You pull your cash buyers list, you add the people you've networked to that cash buyers list, and you can use the same marketing channels you use for acquisitions to reach out to those very same cash buyers. If you're using text messages for acquisitions, send those buyers a text message and just direct them to the pictures of the property or your website or wherever you have all the information. If you use an RVM, do the same thing. If you're using cold calls, call them, right? That's That's a simple, lower cost way to do it.
There you go. Right. So you got a huge net on the front side trying to get a deal. You get a deal, you get it under contract, throw out a net on the other side of the business trying to get to cash buyers, right? Like, hey, who wants to buy this for me? And, hopefully you can sell that deal. Can you talk about what a typical deal, some of those numbers on a typical wholesale deal might look for us?
Yeah. So the profit for us, you want me to give you the split for everybody?
Yeah. Like if this person starting in investing in real estate and this is their first wholesale deal, like, where should their expectations be?
Yeah. So I'm going to give the baseline numbers. If you can do better than this, then go for it. Right. Let's say I lock up a property for $70,000, right? And it needs 10 grand worth of work, rehab by our own estimation. Okay. So I'm going to contract for 70, 10 grand rehab. And I think the ARV is 150, right? So that's a deal, right? So like if you bought that, you probably turn a profit. So that's a deal. Okay. So I'm probably thinking, well, what can I sell this for? Okay. Most wholesalers start with their fee and they're flirting in the 8 to 12K range. Some wholesalers will drop their fees like all the way down to 5K, but I don't advise wholesalers to run a business like that because then you end up negotiating with buyers and you have like $500 fees in your business. Anyway, so I think most people start there. They want to have an 8 to 12 grand buffer that they can turn a profit on the deal. So on that deal, since it's a really good one, I probably say, okay, I'm new. Maybe I put it at 12 grand, right? Maybe I put that at 12K because as a buyer, I'm looking at that deal and I'm thinking 150 ARV, right? I can get that thing for $82,000, put 10 grand worth of work. I'm into it for 92. And then I got all that extra room in the back end. Someone's going to buy that deal, right? An experienced wholesaler is probably turning that into a 20K fee, right? If you're brand new, don't go nuts, right? Like volume is important at the beginning of your business. So you can get really quality deals, make sure you sell them, build your brand, build your relationships. But I think that's a quintessential good wholesale deal, just at a low price point. And then in that situation, the seller gets out of trouble, wholesaler makes a good fee, and that buyer in that case is going to turn a profit as long as all that checks out.
Nice. All right. So that's how you would wholesale it. And what if you then graduated to flipping a property, right? We got to backtrack a little bit and talk about funding for a moment, right?
Yeah.
How would this same deal look if you're like, hey, instead of wholesaling it this time, I want to flip it myself, but I also might not have all the money required, so I gotta come up with that money. So can you answer the flipping question and work in the how do I get funding too?
Yeah. So in our business, because we do flip some of our homes, we kind of look at it like, okay, like if we flip the house, so we're going to make 3 times the amount that we would on a fee, right? And there's a common sense check in there because that also proves out that there's going to be enough room for error in your rehab estimates that you won't get in trouble, right? So that's kind of, if you're a wholesaler, you can kind of look at it like that after a while. So we definitely are seeking a higher return, obviously, if we're going to take on the risk of doing a rehabilitation, just like every other cash buyer out there. And we also, in our case, look for lighter rehabs just because we are out of state, right? If you're a general contractor, you can disregard what I just said. But that's kind of how we decide, to be honest. It's pretty straightforward. But funding deals, separate conversation, right? You mostly have 2 options in the off-market space, or 3 really. If you're filthy rich, you can use your own cash, right? But let's just put that one to the side. Let's go to the other 2 primary ones because most people don't have enough money to just gobble up houses. So you have hard money and you have private money. I advise people to actually start with private money. It's easier, actually, in my opinion, to get hard money after you've done 1 or 2 deals. But it's actually kind of hard to get hard money if you've done 0 deals. You know what I mean? It's it's like a paradox. The private money is harder to scale than hard money down the road, but it's almost easier to start with private money than hard money. Yeah. So like your mom, your dad, your uncle, your grandfather, your aunt, like someone, your best friend, like your buddy works at a hedge fund. He's short at GME and he's back in business, right? Like whatever, right? Like somebody around you hopefully has some cash, okay? And you can go to them and say, hey, like I got an awesome deal. I'm growing my real estate business. I've done some wholesale deals and I found one that's so awesome. I want to take it down myself and I'd love to partner with you in the deal. You can give them 2 options. At the beginning, you can't just push people around, right? So I would give people 2 options. You can either lend to me on the deal and this is what your returns look like, or we can JV on the deal and this is what our returns look like. And you just give them the option. That way, you're not really seen as coercive, and you're seen as kind of like a problem solver to that person, and your chances of success go higher. Now, if it's a great deal and you JV, your upside is going to be more capped, right? So there's a give and take there. But to me, if it's the first time doing it, just get your foot out the door, So don't even worry about all this stuff. We did some deals at the beginning that were JVs that we would no longer JV now,
Yeah, and so what if it's a good friend? They've got money, they want to invest with us. Talk about hypothetically kind of what could that JV look like, and then what could the straight loan look like as well, as far as terms. I know there's a range, but give me an idea.
Yeah. So on a JV deal, let's say you found the deal. That's the assumption here. And you're going to manage that particular project. I think it's fair to say that even if they're providing all or almost all of the capital, and you're just providing the deal and all the work, I think you should be taking somewhere between 40 and 60% of those particular profits. Now, I also think especially if you're at the beginning of your journey, you should be sharing some of that downside though too, right? So if the deal loses 10 grand, like whatever your upside was, your downside should be commensurate with that, right? So you want to cover that in that meeting that you're having with that partner. They can't just give you all the money, cap their upside, and have all the downside either. So I wouldn't advise doing that with $0 in your bank account, right? If you're flipping, you have to be prepared to lose a little bit of money, because if you do 100 flips, you will lose. So God forbid something happens, you don't screw your buddy over, okay? So I want to be totally upfront about that. But I think your sweat equity should be significant. I've seen people, and maybe it's imposter syndrome or something, when they're first starting out, they shortchange themselves. They're like, oh, I'll take 20%, and they provide all the capital. I'm like, hey, man, hey, lady, you found this awesome deal. You're managing a rehab, which is really stressful. Then you got to manage the buyer and the buyer's agent at the end with your agent. It's a lot of work. Like, get paid, right? And then on the lending side, much more straightforward. If it's a family friend, I think rates between 8 and 11% are on the table. Some people can get better, especially if they have a rich uncle or aunt or something. They might be willing to lend to you and only get a 6% return. That's great. But our private loans are all between 8 and 11%. The one thing at the beginning I like to do is say, hey, I'm buying this $100,000 house. I'm going to pay you this amount of interest each particular month, interest-only payments. I'm going to pay you back the remaining balance in a year. And then listen, because my deals sometimes move really fast, I'm going to give you a minimum 3 months of interest, right? So if I close this deal in 2 months, that extra third month is bonus payment for you. And then we'll just do the next deal, right? So then their 9% return can turn into like a 10 or 11% return if they keep doing business with you. So it's like a nice little carrot to dangle at almost no risk to yourself, because if you close a deal in 2 months in real estate, like you probably succeeded, So I look at that as a no risk bonus that you can give your lenders.
Nice. So finding, funding, finishing, wholesaling, flipping, Burr. What's the hardest part of all that, do you think, Frank?
Wholesaling, Burrs. The hardest, well, it's finding deals is the hardest.
I agree. I know that's a broad question, right? But
yeah.
Back to the title of the show, how do you get started? You got to be able to find great deals. And if you can't find them yourself, you got to find a wholesaler that can bring them to you. We haven't really talked about agents. You got to find an agent that can spot good deals. But I think finding deals is the hardest part.
Yeah, I think the older I get, the more I think if you're going to do this for the long haul, you can't really be reliant on anybody. So like agents can be a source of deals, but if you're completely reliant on 1, 2, 3 agents, like I feel like even flow or having consistent deal flow is going to always be a problem, unless you're so well networked, you got 20 agents that are hustling for you. If that's you, then congratulations. But most people don't have that, especially if you haven't bought a lot of properties yet. So I think what I'm saying is if you're really willing to stick in the game and get involved, like I think you should put the power in your hands and find the deals yourself, right? If you want to have longevity.
Let's then talk about how do you scale this thing, right? Like that's where we're going to. How do you scale? I think the interesting thing about that question is you and I look at it like we love to scale, right? Like that's what makes us Greyline Investments is anything that's successful, we scale. But that's not the right answer for everyone. So what should a new investor set their expectations for scaling? How should they scale?
This isn't a doctrine or anything, but I like in real estate the thought that you hustle yourself and you scale underneath that work, right? So what does that look like? It means if you're trying to find deals, you go and you're doing text message. You pull your list in PropStream or IDI or wherever. You text or cold call that list. You close a couple deals yourself, right? You speak to the sellers. You get rejected. Like you figure out what your script needs to be, and you get reps. Like you do some reps. Then you can train someone and they replace you, right? So you've hustled, and now you scaled it, right? Then you probably want to focusing on your disposition or your contract to close part of your business. You'll hustle it and you'll scale it, right? So I think if you're not trying to spend a ton of money or burn through a lot of cash, like that's a way to do it. If you have $1 million, you probably just start hiring right away and learn by trial and error, but that's going to be more expensive, right? If you're trying to do a grassroots thing, like that's my advice. Like do the hustle before you drop 20 grand on employees, pay-per-click, and all this other stuff, because it's really, really hard to understand the space and train people if you've never done it yourself. So hustle to scale.
No, I like that. I like that a lot. So let's get into a deal. We're getting ready to wrap up here. We're going to cover a couple deals. We just closed a deal in Cape Coral. That was a really good deal for us. Cape Coral, Florida. The interesting thing about it is we're both in New York. Our team spread out across the country. None of us are in Florida, yet we closed this deal in Florida. Can you talk about kind of how we found the deal, funded the deal, and finished the deal?
Yeah. So this deal, our acquisition manager, Adam, found. It was a tired landlord list that we hit via SMS or text in Cape Coral, Florida. And I remember this seller because I had to, for some reason, me and Adam had to both talk to her. There was like some good cop, bad cop going on in the sales process. I remember this lady. She had another financial burden that was held.
You just muted yourself.
Yeah, my mic just came undone. I'm back. So,
All right, good to go.
So she had another obligation. She wanted to get liquid, and she wanted to take whatever equity she could out of this house. We called her just at the right time. So we get this house, and we got it for 180 grand. The house across the street is a new construction. It was like 350K. Like the new constructions. It's close to the water, close to the Gulf of Mexico. Anyway, nice area. So immediately when Adam locked it up, I remember I saw it hit our board. And I was like, man, this is interesting, right? Because this isn't like a rental market. This market has upside. So it immediately got my attention. And I put a note in our CRM like, hey, this is one that we should look to purchase if we can. So we gather all the details about the house. We do the walkthrough, and our contractor shows up to the walkthrough, and they tell us the tenant's awesome, super nice, incredibly clean. Like the tenant fixed his stuff in the house on their own. And the house is in immaculate condition, like nothing wrong with it. And the house behind it wasn't a new construction. It was built at the same time, and it sold for like $245, right? I'm like, okay, here we go time. So to me, we do the math, and I'm looking at that as a wholesale deal. We probably make $15,000 to $20,000 on that wholesale deal, right? But then I look at it and I'm saying, well, if we buy this and we do a little bit of work, we can make $40,000 to $60,000. If we do no work, we're looking at 30 to 40 to 45, right? So we decided we're going to wholesale it, right? So we didn't take the full-blown rehab option, but we knew we could hold it for maybe a month, 45 days, wait for the tenant to move out, and at least sell it for what the house behind it sold for. So that's what we did. We raised the money to one of our private lenders, or through one of our private lenders that we had networked with, and they funded 100% of that purchase price. So bought it for 180. They brought, and the closing costs were like $2,000. They bought all that to their closing table. And the tenant's rent, I remember this, was like $1,550, and our hard money loan payments plus our insurance and all that stuff was like $1,400. So we were cash flowing like $110 a month on this home with this awesome tenant, right? And we actually were able to sell this home, FSBO, prior to the tenant ever leaving, right? We were like, let's just get ahead of it. If we FSBO it and it fails, we'll just put it with an agent and just, we'll do it the old fashioned way. But we said, hey, if we can cut this down by 30 days, let's do it. And it worked. So we FSBO'd it. We put it under contract for $225K cash offer. So we could have got probably a little bit more, but it was cash. So I said, let's just take it. And, we're going to net like $35,000. And we had no money in at any point whatsoever. So we actually did have a true infinite return on that deal. Because I think our investment was like negative like $300. It was pretty awesome. So out of all the deals we've done, that's definitely one of my favorites.
Very, very solid. The deal I want to talk about quick is a fourplex in Lawton, Oklahoma, right outside Fort Sill. I've got a couple fourplexes there, but the second fourplex I bought there, okay? There's a section on the east side of Lawton where there's probably 20 fourplexes next to each other. It's in a good area. I like the fourplexes. I wanted to buy them, but none of them were listed for sale. So I figured out how to look on the county website to figure out the owners of these fourplexes, right? So all 20 owners, I looked up their information, wrote down all their addresses, and then sent them all letters, right? And it was kind of a sappy letter. It was like, me and my wife and our kids. And I was like, just real estate investor,
You put a picture in there?
Oh yeah. Super picture. That's like all American family. Right. And it was awesome. We sent 20 of them and the response rate was something like 25% or something. It was like typical response rates are like 1% is really good, but it was like 25% response rate. I still talk to 3 or 4 of the owners, but one of the owners, these fourplexes were probably worth like $225 or so. And this lady called me and said, if you give me $180,000, I'll sell it to you right now. And we went back and forth. I tried to negotiate as hard as I could. She wouldn't move off $180,000. But the bottom line is at 180, 225 fourplex, and rents were like 600 a piece, right? So decent numbers. Hitting the 1% rule, or over the 1% rule for sure, right? But then I didn't have $180,000, so what was I going to do? Well, I talked to a private lender, a family friend, and said, hey, any interest in funding this for me? Right? And he wasn't really sure. We had to figure it out. Bottom line is he said, okay, I'll do it. We agreed on a 12-month term at 8% interest with no payments until we refinanced it, right? So we bought it for $180,000 from the private money lender. After we bought it, we refinanced out. It appraised where it was supposed to be, paid back the private money lender, and now we've got a loan on it, right? Like, so I got this thing, no money out of my own pocket. It's now cash flowing really, really solid. It's gone up in value. It's probably close to 245, 250 right now. And again, this is something anyone could do. You don't need a bunch of experience to do that. Looked on the county website, sent them all letters, got it under contract at a decent price, didn't use agents, used private money, and now we got a great cash flowing asset. So,
yeah, that's really legit. Also, I like that deal because it shows that you can pull another lever. Like, there's another thing you can negotiate on private money, and this is another advantage over hard money loans. Like, you didn't pay your interest payments until you really wanted to, So like, it could look something like, hey, I want you to lend to me at 7%. And they're like, no. And you're like, well, and like, you just can do the back and forth, right? And you're like, well, I don't know. It's just, it's awesome that you can do when the payments are paid, interest only, or if there's principal included in the payments, the interest rate, the time to pay back the note. Like, there's like 5 things you could do. It's awesome, right? So you can always like find a solution that works for you and the lender.
Excellent. Let's talk one more deal and then we'll wrap it up. So tell us about this deal in Tennessee.
Wait, which deal in Tennessee? Which one are we talking about?
Veranda.
Oh, Veranda Circle. Oh, yeah. So we do more than a couple deals, so I don't always remember. So Veranda Circle was a really funny deal. We tried to offer the seller cash, and then we weren't able to agree on a price, and we offered them subject to, AKA taking over their existing loan and insurance payments, their PITI, principal, interest, taxes, insurance. We take over all their payments, and sometimes you have to give them like a little bit of money at closing. In this particular case, we did not. All we did was we closed on the property, they handed over the deed, and we went into their online portal to pay their mortgage, and that was it. We recorded that, and we own the home. So we did that. There was a tenant in the home. We were renting it out, and we were kind of like breaking even. I remember the PITI and the tenant's payments were almost equal. So we were no money out of pocket, but we weren't cash flowing. We were just kind of flat each particular month to an insignificant amount. The home needed a little bit of work, but it looked great. Like, you could show it almost immediately but the inspection would pop up with a lot of stuff. Like that was kind of the condition of the house, right? So we put a little bit of work into the house after the tenant moved out after a month or two. I think we spent about $6,000, maybe $8,000 max. And we had the home, the previous loan balance was 140 or something like that. And we listed it for 185 and we got our price. After all the negotiations post-inspection, we netted out with like a $25,000 profit. And again, like at closing, we had no money out of pocket outside of paying for stamps and some title fees that we promised the seller we would pay for. So, I mean, not an infinite return, but it was pretty damn close. Like we're talking like $1,000 maybe at closing, and you're making 25 grand. And it's a really cool deal. It also proves out to me that you can do no money in deals in real estate. It is possible, but it does require you in some cases to be creative on the front end if you're going direct to seller. I think there's a lot of people that say, oh, BRRRR is the best way to do no money down deals. And I'm like, well, you're still probably gonna have to get a lender involved, and you're still bringing money to the table in a BRRRR, right? If you're doing true no money down, seller finance subject to is like, to me, the true definition of no money in the deal. So I think it's pretty awesome.
Nice. Last question for you will be, your final advice for someone getting started. But I want to give a quick preview. We've got our first guest all signed up and ready to go for our next podcast. Someone who's had a big influence on our business and our success. He's what I would call an influencer in the space. He's helped hundreds of investors. He's super well networked. I'm excited to hear his story and hear his advice. Really excited about that. If you want to get on our cash buyers list, make sure you go to graylineinvestments.com, get signed up. We've also got a mastermind, and we're working on a lead generation course that hasn't gone public yet. But if you're interested, stay tuned. So last question, Frank, is, how does someone get started? What advice do you have?
Well, I think you definitely do the research. You read, do YouTube University, and listen to podcasts. Start with Bigger Pockets. It's great. There's a reason a lot of people listen to it, because Brandon Turner, I think, is a great host and is honest. So do that. Definitely do the things we talked about at the beginning. But I think shortly after that, you do your 100 hours. Get on the phone. If you're not talking to sellers, you have to talk to somebody, right? Talk to an agent. Talk to a property manager. Like, there's a little trial and error to navigating the off-market real estate space. It is what it is. And your first couple conversations, the person on the other end is going to know probably pretty quickly you have no clue what you're doing, unless you're really rehearsed or super savvy or a great salesperson. Like, it is what it is. So just get that out of the way, do the research, get that out of the way. And then after a couple of weeks, you're ready to go, start making offers. There's no substitute for action. So that's my answer.
I like it. I think my advice would be, don't do it. It's really, really hard. But if you're going to do it, it can be amazing. If you have an entrepreneurial mindset, you're willing to put in the work and take action, you embrace sales, or at least the ability to do sales, you can make a lot of money. You can make an awesome business. I think it's something that you can make money during good times and bad times. Just make sure you go hard, because it's a very competitive space. But thanks so much for listening. Frank, as always, it was a pleasure, my friend.
All right, brother. Appreciate it. Bye, everybody.